Listener, today we're joined by someone who knows exactly what it takes to lead through chaos, through uncertainty, through high stakes pressure. We're welcoming to the show today Rome Madison. Now, Rome is a certified executive coach. He's a former precision medicine sales leader, a dynamic speaker, and an expert on engineering confidence, on embracing uncertainty, and building high performing teams. All of which is just incredibly relevant for frankly, the chaos that's going on outside in society and business today. Rome's been through startups, through corporate collapses, through restructurings, and through explosive growth. And Rome understands how to turn adversity into competitive advantage. So if you're a CEO who's feeling stuck or stretched, or you're navigating through tough terrain, my suggestion would be prepare to be challenged, prepare to be motivated, and inspired by our conversation today. So, Rome Madison, welcome to the show. We are thrilled to have you with us today.
Patrick, Patsy, thank you for the invitation. Congratulations on your 100th episodes, and man, you guys just keep going, because the guests and the content that you put out there is really, really valuable for aspiring leaders.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Those who are already in the hot seat.
Yeah, thank you. I honestly, I pinch myself sometimes trying to figure out, how did we get to 100 episodes? I mean, we're past that now, but the answer is always, well, one at a time. But man, yeah. So thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So we said we're going to talk about confidence today, and that's from the work that we've done, and obviously reaching out to you to have you on the show, the research we've done on you. Like I'm excited to unpack this with you, but let's not assume that everybody has the same basic understanding of even what that means. Let's just go back to the basics. What do you mean by confidence? What is true confidence for a CEO?
Well, true confidence for a CEO, and it's good to deconstruct the whole thing, right? Because naturally there are people that are born with more inherent belief in themselves and their abilities. But that's certainly not everybody. And, people are not confident all the time in all things. And so what I mean by confidence, especially as it pertains to leaders and leadership roles like a CEO, is really your ability to activate your confidence, to project confidence, to increase your influence in the moment, right? To become more persuasive, to get people to buy in, and also to inspire confidence in those that you lead. And from a CEO level, it goes without saying that that individual has to be a confident person, because you get all the darts and arrows, not only from those outside the organization, but you're the punching bag inside the organization. But confidence, again, is a skill. And I break it down in terms of three real components that builds that rock solid confidence from the CEO level, a visionary leadership level. And the first aspect of that is self-acceptance. Even though you get in the role of CEO and you may not have, experience in the role, you may not have experience in marketing, you may not have sold that product or really be, someone who's made success in that particular industry. But the cornerstone is that it is accepting that. Okay, got it. Now what? Because the role of CEO and having that confidence really is about knowing the problem that you want to solve as an organization. What's your why? What's your purpose for existing? And if you can ground yourself in that, despite all the limitations, despite all the past interruptions or challenges that the organization may have had, despite even some of the uncertainties that are sure to come in the marketplace, if you are set on your purpose and that being the starting point of your organization's effectiveness and the reason why that you exist in the marketplace, that's one place that you can ground yourself to build that true confidence. The second thing is your self-competence, right? Being honest about your weaknesses and not being hesitant to shore up those weaknesses while also amplifying your strengths. So it really is about that continued growth. Even though you're in the leadership position that everybody looks to, it helps to set the example, and it helps to be transparent about your growth process, the things that you need to learn. We'll get to one of the key components, of which I think is so important for CEOs and kind of the Achilles heel of many CEOs in terms of its effect on the success of the organization, success or failure of the organization. But then the third thing, really to build rock solid confidence as a leader. And again, I'm not saying that once you get there, you stay there, but this is that framework that you have to compete. You have to reevaluate yourself at all times, accepting where you are, right? Competence, understanding where your strengths, where your weaknesses are, even as an organization, the people you have in these leadership roles, understanding what their competencies are and not being afraid to call people out and be accountable for those competencies or making changes. But the third thing is the strategy. As a CEO, you may not be responsible for driving the strategy, but as a CEO, you've got to have some semblance of a strategy as a CEO in terms of your leadership, in terms of enabling those people to make decisions at the lowest level based on what that strategy is, understanding what your diagnostic measures are that you're going to hold your leaders accountable. So there is a strategy that's there. And if you understand and continuously are in the space of self-acceptance, being crystal clear for yourself where you are and where your growth opportunities are, the competencies that you've got and the competencies that you need inside the organization, and then ensuring that there's a strategy to get there. Well, that makes everybody more confident because you become a more effective communicator of those competencies and those strategies to get people to buy in and to really commit to the vision of the organization. So it's a skill.
So what I'm hearing is, true confidence. There's an internal component and then there's an external component. So the internal component is showing up, right? It's the work inside. So you said, like, accept what you do, self-acceptance, accept what you know and what you don't, accept what you have and what you don't, and be okay with that. And then self-competence, there's the, do I have the skills that it takes? And the strategy piece. And if I do those three things, so there's the change happens inside, but I'm also I'm giving off something. What am I trying to say? I show up in a way that others can relax and be confident in me, right? That it builds their confidence. So it's an internal and an external.
It is,
melding.
and those three things when they work together. And again, I'm not here to get people to believe that once you've got it, you've got it. It is day to day. It could be week to week. It could be month to month. And we can get into those functions as an organization moves, how those things are thrown off kilter. But that has got to be the core, and that's what I teach CEOs, leaders. We've got a session called the Confidence Clinic that teaches people, leaders, how to operate within this framework and why it works in terms of getting people to buy into your leadership, why it increases your influence. Because the key there is if you do that, it offloads all the anxiety and uncertainty and allows people to get focused and run faster.
And you just described a lifelong journey for any of us, at least the leaders we work with. And it also is debunking a lot of leadership myths that I have to have it all figured out, that it's all about me, So can you talk a little bit more to just kind of where to start? How do you embrace
Absolutely.
this process?
Well, I always say it's about humility. And so a great story I always like to tell, in like 840 BC, in Greece. Like the oracle at Delphi proclaimed Socrates to be the wisest man in all of Greece. But, when Socrates like heard that, his reaction wasn't boastful and saying, it's about time someone recognized. It was one of humility. And the way he approached that is he thought it was like patently ridiculous that he would be proclaimed the wisest man in all of Greece, because who would he learn from? And so what he did to go out and test that is he went into the synagogues, he went into the open forums, because, in ancient Greece, the way that they, would learn universities, they would go debate. So it was open forum of debate. And so after several years of doing this, Socrates learned that the oracle was right, that he was the wisest man in all of Greece, because he knew that he didn't know very much, right? And was willing and ready to be open to learn and be vulnerable, while all of these other supposedly experts and, wise people were so caught up in things that they already knew, right? That they were not open to learning more. And so the saying goes about Socrates is that I know that I know nothing, right? And that's a wise person. And so it is a bit of a humility exercise for leaders to go in and be vulnerable, because I don't know, in some cases is okay, because that's genuine. And we just talked about the pressure is that you have to know everything. And so you develop this posture of defensiveness that, I've got this on, and all that does is really drive you away from your organization. It might drive you further away from your customer. And that's kind of a danger zone when we find that CEOs aren't really connected, because they don't have their finger on the pulse of what's going on. They kind of lose their leadership influence. So they there's a lot of distance between them and other people in the organization. But it really is that place where you start is a place of humility, because you can't, and this is the way I'll put it. It'll come to me in a second. So you have to get into a place that you're not so sure of what you know that you can't learn something new, right? Sure. And if you're so sure of what you know, a lot of times that blocks you from seeing the future differently. And that's essential. What I'm driving towards is that sheer humility and confidence, because it's driven by confidence, to say, maybe I don't know everything and I'm willing to learn from you, right? It doesn't take away your level of influence. It doesn't take away your leadership authority, with people. If anything, it really can endear your organization to you, because you're willing to learn and be vulnerable and be more relatable, because many of the leaders have those, and many of the people who follow CEOs have those same feelings. And so it really does endear them to the organization and cause people to buy in more to your leadership vision.
I think it does. It gives people permission. It gives other people permission to not have all the answers. There is, I should say, I was going to say there's confidence in authenticity, but maybe a better way of saying it is there's the opportunity for confidence in authenticity. Hey, this is who I am. I don't know everything. And I say there's opportunity for confidence and authenticity if I can just, to your point, embrace that I don't have to know everything, that I can embrace that as the opportunity for lifelong learning, as opposed to and to contrast that with the old fake it till you make it kind of approach, where it's like, okay, I have to stand up and I have to, I have to fake it until I make it, which to me is the opposite of authenticity, where you just go up and own, hey, I don't have the answers. In fact, you guys have the answers. Help me, or let's figure this out together. Maybe none of us has the answers. Let's figure it out together. Fake it till you make it, to me, feels like, it feels like a race against the clock, just based on what you're saying. Fake it till I make it is a race against the clock. I'm faking it. I now have to either make it or I'm going to be exposed that I don't really know what I'm talking about. That to me doesn't feel like confidence. That feels like, anxiety and stress.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, when we're talking about confidence, it does start. It goes back to the self-acceptance. If you can't accept that you feel inadequate or you feel that you don't know, then it's going to be hard for other people to look beyond that. But if you can accept that, look, it doesn't necessarily threaten you as an individual. You've got to get beyond yourself to know that it's okay that I don't know who does know, and let's learn from them, or let's learn together. And this is the thing to me that is the Achilles heel of many CEOs, that they're too far away from their customer and they lose their opportunity or they lose their influence, because eventually, if you're faking it till you make it, you can only fake it for so long and to so many people. But those who are closest to the customer know if you get it or you don't.
So for me, it seems like a counterintuitive move to start the first skill being self-acceptance. And usually, at least in my experience with some art, it requires a breakdown or some kind of major event for us to stop long enough to go, okay, who am I? What was my role in this? Yeah, and certainly that will continue to happen for a lot of people. But if we wanted to make it easier on ourselves and go back and learn that first skill, self-acceptance, where do we start? How doesn't live in our culture that that's a place we would naturally start.
And that is the whole reason I kind of turned this whole model on its head, because people kind of expect, when they're hiring me or to come in and talk to an organization or talking about confidence, it is, hey, how can we get people to stand up straighter and just have more moxie? Well, it actually doesn't start there. It actually starts with coming into and being introspective about what we've got and what we don't got. And it's the same with just confidence as we walk around here every day. Nick Saban is what I consider the greatest college football coach, that ever lived. And he talks about rat poison. When you start to read your own press and you start to believe the things that people say about you, even though his teams were in the running for the national championship every year, he still called it rat poison. Don't believe the hype. Stay at a humble level, because once you kind of start believing, your own press, you develop this level of arrogance or this level of expectation that other people are going to praise you. But it's not static. You're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotting in life. And so you've got to build that confidence with knowing, like, here's where we are and that's okay. But we've got to be honest about where we are so we can attack it and get better. Right. And so that's why it's so counterintuitive. And that's why I love to start there with organizations, because they may have a belief that we're going to come in and talk about something else. And so we really have to, as leaders, become more humble, because we learn more from the people, that we lead. They gain more trust in you as a leader when you are able to show your vulnerability or show your willingness, to be humble or vulnerable and to learn. So it really does start with that level of self-acceptance. You are the only one you're ever going to be. It doesn't matter to compare yourself to anybody else. Only, we always got these measuring sticks. We all do it, and it's almost necessary to some degree, but it still comes back to, hey, I'm okay. I'm equipped to do all the things that I want to do as a leader. How do I get there? Right? How do I become more open? How do I become more transparent? Because that is what gets buy-in from people who really want to win and follow the winner.
Yeah. I what you're describing, that self-acceptance, and you said it's comparing, the danger of comparing yourself to others. We've talked about this on this program, but this is like foundational just for me personally, and then I certainly weave it into a lot of the work that I do with organizations. And that's comparison is the thief of joy. That the moment I start comparing my ability as a leader or as a speaker, as a writer, as even just in the performance of my job, the moment I look to my left and to my right, The trap is I'm either going to think I'm better than you, which is, pride begets the fall, right? You start thinking I'm better than you, and then you become completely right. You read your own press clippings, and you set yourself up for failure. Or I'm going to think I'm not as good as you, and I found that like nothing will make me shy away from realizing my potential, like pull back from confidence. Nothing will shatter my confidence more than thinking I'm not as good as that person or that person or that person. And so instead, to me, the visual that I often use is every one of us has a toolbox. Like you got a toolbox that you bring with you into every scenario, every situation, every client you work with, every time you speak, every time you write, every time you go to work, everywhere you go. When you go home, you bring this toolbox with you because you really, in effect, you are the toolbox. And if you were to go through everybody's toolbox, everybody has great tools, but we also have very different tools, right? We don't have the exact same tools. And so to grow in confidence, to own who you are, I just believe it this way. You don't have to be anything more than you already are, but you damn well better not be anything less, right?
Precisely.
You better not leave a tool in the toolbox. And that's where I say nothing will make me leave a tool in the toolbox more than looking in your toolbox and going, well, you got better tools than I do. You know what? I'm just going to close this lid. I don't want anybody to see how, these tools are not as good. They're not, I don't have as many. No, I have great tools. You have great tools. We can be great together.
Yes.
And that, like, there's room for all of us to be confident just in who we are, in our authenticity, and not try to be somebody else. That's where I lose confidence. When I start trying to be like you, I'm going to fall far short.
I love that analogy because, again, we're on this topic of acceptance that focuses on you and not others. Even when we're talking about looking in somebody else's toolbox, they might have better tools, but if they don't use them effectively, I can whoop you to death with a pipe wrench. Okay, you got it. A little morbid analogy, but the point being, one of the CEOs that I work with told me this, and I never forgot it. Many people say that hard work beats talent, right? But that's not really true. Hard work only beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, right? So it doesn't matter the toolbox or what someone else has. Don't get into the trap of comparing yourself. Only focus on you and be transparent and open and honest with you about your toolbox and how effectively you're using your tools. You know if you're using your tools or you're not.
So I would love to hear how this springboards or how this supports, which is what you were talking about when we first introduced you, translates into organizational performance.
So I'll give you, I got, examples from my own, path, but generally speaking, when the best leaders, and gosh, Lee Iacocca, right? Those who, and the reason I mentioned Lee Iacocca, he took over Daimler Chrysler when they were, failing, and he famously went without a salary for a year, right, and turned the company around. We throw around the title servant leadership, but at a CEO level, it's important for CEOs to really understand servant leadership because the natural hierarchy of the organization is that everybody rolls up to you. They report to the CEO. But in reality, the attitude and the posture that a successful CEO must adopt is, I work for the organization. Not only do I work for the employees in the organization, I also work for the shareholders. I work for the customers. And so that is the first thing when we're talking about, confidence and humility and what that has to do with an organization. If you can adopt that mindset that I work for the organization, it will forever change how you're perceived in the organization, how people respond to you, because you put that first. And I think it makes you more relatable. And it doesn't drive a wedge or distance between you and the organization. If anything, it just pulls you in closer and amplifies your influence because that relatability. The second thing being competence. So if you can, adopt that type of posture that of servant leadership, knowing that I'm here for you, not just organization, but also shareholders and customer. And then you get to driving competence in the organization because you are responsible, for the organization, because you do work for the organization and the shareholders and your customers. It's my responsibility to make sure that you're equipped to do your job, to hold you accountable to do that job, and then to make sure that we are properly, giving you the tools, the resources, the training, and all those things that are needed in order to be successful. And that is setting a bar of standard. That's setting a bar of performance. It's the standard. It is I call it positive peer pressure, right? Who says peer pressure is a bad thing? Peer pressure is not a bad thing when it is positive peer pressure for people to opt in and really to perform. And that sets the stage for culture and performance in an organization that is unlike anything else, right? Again, it is incumbent upon the CEO, that visionary leader, to get as close as you can to that organization, as close as you can to the customer. And that in this context that we're talking about, your customer is also the internal people inside your organization. They're your internal customers. So you have to align there and get there. And if you can raise that bar, set the standard of competence for the organization, not only to be a master of the problem that you solve for your customers, but also, embodying that language, that posture, that approach to the business that says we're always going to be tasked to improve, right? And to vet our assumptions, to question our assumptions. Going back to the whole story around Socrates, right? You can't think that you've arrived, even though you've had success. You really still want to keep that positive peer pressure on inside of your organization to continue to improve, to vet your assumptions, and to do what you can to continue to be more efficient, more productive inside an organization. So that's the competency piece. And, that involves equipping people with the right skills, having the right training, knowing your market, having the voice of the customer, all those things, the competencies that are needed to perform and have longevity inside of your industry. And then once you've got the self-acceptance, it is a posture of humility that, success and failure is all dependent upon leadership. It begins and ends with the leader. And the leader many times sets the tone for the culture or the personality of the organization. And then when everybody adopts, that idea of competency, working on those competencies, knowing that you're never just there, you're always striving to improve, then that feeds into the strategy. And, the strategy is something that you have to continue to vet, to challenge, to get as close as you can to your customer, to ensure that you're solving the right problem or nailing the job that actually needs to be done. The reason why your customer buys, not a correlative reason, but an actual causative reason why they're going to buy your product. All those things feed into having a confident organization. And when you have a confident organization that is based on the pace that's set by that visionary leader at the top, people move faster. They're more confident and lean into whether it's taking risk, going into the unknown. It's that sort of personality, that sort of atmosphere that the leader creates by embodying that framework of self-acceptance, self-competence, and ensuring that the strategy is sound and that you always challenge yourself to be better.
I have a question. It's actually been rattling in my brain since you first started talking, well, since your answer to the first question, what is true confidence? When you talk about self-acceptance, and there's an assumption in there that I think there's a nurture component to this, right? You said some people are just born with confidence. I believe that. That's the beauty of the toolbox, man. That's not a tool in my toolbox. I can say I grew up with very little self-esteem, right? It was the environment, a lot of circumstances, and I'm 54 years old. So it's a like you were talking about confidence. You said it's not a forever thing. It's a daily thing. It's a weekly thing. It's a forever journey. As you've worked with leaders, if there's somebody that's listening who's like, yeah, like confidence, like that self-acceptance thing, I didn't get that growing up. Like there's if you knew me, you wouldn't, you'd know how hard that is. There's really nothing here to. How have you guided leaders who have just struggled with that first step? Because you've built a model that starts with self-acceptance. And if I can't do that, I'm screwed, right? So like, how do I get to the self-competence and then the strategy if I think there's nothing here? How have you guided or coached leaders who have just struggled with that basic understanding that you're enough, you're good, like you're already equipped?
That's a really good question. And the reason why I'm able to teach this is not because I'm just so devilishly handsome and successful.
Well, you are. Yeah.
And so what you talked about, Patrick, has been my experience. The reason why I can teach this is because I've lived it. And so, this is the time when I take away any excuse of those people that are out there and they go, well, you've already been successful. You've done this. I was an athlete. I too was that kid that didn't grow up with a lot of self-esteem. I was, raised in a single parent household. My mother battled mental health issues while raising 3 kids. So I didn't get that affirmation when I was a young child. I was an athlete, and so I was confident in my abilities, but there was an acceptance piece that I just did not have. And so it was throughout the course of my life that I had to learn these things. And the story that I share is, once I got into, or how I got into this industry that we call precision medicine or genetics and genomics, the Human Genome Project completed in the early 2000s. And that was an investment that the NIH helped, make several, medical centers around the U.S. Sequence different parts of the human genome, like our DNA. And that series, that project completed in the early 2000s. And so in the early 2000s, we knew every gene in the body. We don't know the function of very many of them, especially back then. That project took about 13, 14 years to complete, upwards of $10 to $20 billion. And when it completed, it took about $100,000 to sequence one genome, right? So we're talking about some pretty heady stuff. So it was during that time I was unemployed, and I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. And for those who've worked in the pharmaceutical industry, you go through organizational restructuring, lose jobs, things like that. It's just part of it. And I'm sure many of your listeners have been a part of things like this, or it's happened to you. Well, it happened to me. And during this time, I was unemployed for nearly a year, and it's easier to get a job when you already got a job. I think everybody gets that. So the only opportunity I developed a relationship with the recruiter at the time, and he believed in me. And he said, well, I'm going to give you this job description. He gave me this 10-foot tall job description. I couldn't pronounce half the words in it. He said, I know the hiring manager. I think he'll like you. And so what I did is I went to work preparing to interview for this job. None of the qualifications that I had, they wanted someone with 5 years of surgical experience or 5 years of pathology sales experience, 5 years of oncology experience. I had none of them. So I literally had to go to Borders Books, Barnes and Nobles. If people remember, there used to be bookstores where we, went and bought books and drank coffee. Now there's coffee stores where we buy coffee and bring books.
Right.
But the reason I did that is because I didn't have the money to buy these books. So I went there, unemployed for nearly a year. I would spend 5 hours in these stores studying genomics, genetics, cancer care. And I would copy out of these books, right? All while my mother was struggling with her mental health and she had spiraled into a lifestyle of homelessness. So when we talk about acceptance, right? I had all the reasons to pity myself, experiences that I thought that it was destined for me to have a nervous breakdown and be the same as my mother after all, like this is my family, that sort of thing. But that framework of acceptance, hey, this is what I can control, this is what I can't control. I'm going to go improve my competency just to interview for this job because that's the only opportunity that I had. And so the long story there is obviously I studied well enough to get the job opportunity. And I just grew with the industry because it was at the very beginning of that industry. I learned the science. There was only one company selling this type of test that identified cancer patients who were the most or least likely to respond to therapy. And over that period of time, the technology has grown to where we can get this information through early cancer detection by a blood draw, and you can find cancer floating around in your blood, or you can sequence someone's genes that cost now $500 or less, less than $200 to sequence a genome and find targets for that. But the early days in this field were exactly that. Me in Barnes and Noble studying, figuring out how to commercialize this. And I'm having conversations with, department chairs of, breast cancer programs or colorectal cancer programs, where a year ago, I was unemployed. But it's the same framework that I used to position myself and gain influence and expertise in this industry that I share with other people. You've got to get to a point, no matter how bad it is, you can't wish, for things to be different. We must wish for things to be better. And to wish for things to be better, we've got to accept where we currently are and start to work on those competencies to make ourselves better, more influential, and activate that personal power when we really need it to get the things that we want.
Yeah. I think, I thank you for all that. I agree with all of that. I think when my motivation to accomplish more comes from the place of comes from the lack of self-esteem, is where I think the acceptance piece is so important. It's foundational. Just to your point, the way you said it in the beginning, it's like, just accept what you are and what you're not, accept who you are and who you're not, whether you want to use the toolbox analogy or whatever. But because when my motivation for growing my competencies is when I do that, when I learn this or when I accomplish this, then I will be enough. Then I will accept myself. That only it's a short-term fix. It's like, you can accomplish something and you think it will then bring you acceptance, and it does for maybe a period of time. But if you don't really get to the root of embracing, accepting who you are, not for the accomplishments, but just because who you are is actually enough. Like who you are is actually good. And it does come back to earlier you were talking about the beliefs, but people are so certain of things and how that impacts. If my motivation for growing my skill or my certifications is that will bring me acceptance, I think that's a recipe for, whether you want to say burnout or exhaustion. You're just on that hamster wheel where you're constantly the next.
Never going to be enough.
It's never going to be enough. That's right. Those external things are never going to be enough. The enough has to come from within, that acceptance. And
well said, Patrick.
Yeah,
Yes,
I don't know. I mean,
yes.
And so we are kindred spirits on a lot of this. That's yeah.
I could just see us launching into about 5 more subjects here, but it does take me full circle to when you were talking about self-acceptance, where I'm talking about embracing the why and purpose of the organization. I think piggybacking on what Patrick just said, the more that we understand what it is more I understand about my why and my purpose, what I deeply care about, what I uniquely bring to the marketplace, then I think then I increase my ability to accept myself and to build my skills and to then step into
Absolutely.
and
Yeah. Well, you guys can tell that I'm
yes,
passionate
but
about
I
this.
mean,
So that's why it's so important.
it is. And it breaks my heart the number of leaders I work with who, when I ask them, "Who are you as a leader? What do you, why, what's your purpose?" People look at me like I just started Russian or something. So this kind of foundation of knowing ourselves and accepting ourselves is, as we've been talking about, is where it all starts.
And here's another reason why that's important, especially for CEOs. It is unfortunate, but it is the case that and let's just talk about just high achievers in general. Many times, high achievers tend to develop their identity, their self esteem from their accomplishments, right? And what that creates is a situation of high self confidence but low self esteem, right? You're not your GPA, you're not your school that you went to, you're not your title, you're not your salary, because who are you if you don't have those things, right? And there are a lot of, okay, we just talked about this, and I don't know how far that we'll get in the rabbit hole in this. So we just talked about a number of CEOs that are leaving their post. We are experiencing situations where you're seeing corporate restructuring. I know in my industry, in the healthcare industry, the life science industry, there are acquisitions happening. There's consolidations happening. So who are you if you don't have your title and your organization who rolls up to you? You're not a great leader because of your title. You're a great leader because of who you are, and you've got to be accepting, of that, right? To know at your core, people follow you because they're inspired by you. People follow you because they see something in you. There's a light in you that makes them gravitate to that because they aspire to have that same light shining within them that inspires other people. So we are so much more than titles. We are so much more than our jobs. It really is about being grounded in your sense of purpose. And why? Because if we can do that, we are so much more powerful as individuals and as leaders, and to have a dynamic effect on people. Because at the end of the day, in leadership, in visionary leadership, that's what we really want to do. We talk a lot about, the role of the CEO being responsible for profitability, vision, and all those things. But at the end of the day, we're people, and we're here to make the world a little bit better than when we leave it than when we came. And so that's my motivation as a leader. That was my motivation as a leader. That's my motivation in the work that I do today as an executive coach and leader in this field of life sciences.
I want to. I know one of the things that we led with. You've been through a lot, just in the business world, right? You've been through startups. You've been through the good times and the bad times, and you speak on using chaos as an advantage. So, what is it that leaders need to understand more about chaos, or what is it that they get wrong about leading through chaos?
Well, so there's a lot there. So in the Japanese culture, there is a symbol that represents chaos or confusion. That same symbol represents opportunity, right? And so for any uncertain times, it goes back to the activating that skill of confidence, to be able to keep your head when others are losing theirs, to see the opportunities that will emerge in that chaos. That chaos might be, to leverage the chaos to, make an acquisition or make a move somewhere else. It may be an opportunity to get your team to lean into the chaos and acknowledge it, because somebody's looking for somebody to point out the pink elephant in the room, and, to see who's confident enough to stand up there and look at the pink elephant, I guess. So there's always opportunity in chaotic times, in things that happen. And that is the real opportunity to step in and steal market share, to step in and forge an emerging strategy per se. So when things get tough and get chaotic, we've always got to be thinking this is the time to make a move. This is the time to look for those opportunities that can reposition our organization in a way that we can improve our positioning in our product category. We can become leaders while everybody else is trying to hold on and be, innovative and take a risk to go out there to improve how the market sees us or how our organization stands up in these tough times.
Yeah. I think about what comes to mind is Zoom, the software Zoom, that right when the pandemic happened and such chaos and everybody was immediately sent to their corner for a 3 count, or, like everybody was sent home, and look at where Zoom is, from then to now, capitalizing on the opportunity in the midst of the chaos. It's an obvious example, but to your point, there are others for sure.
One of the chaotic things that occurred is in 2016 is when I left corporate and started working in my own, consulting firm. And I saw the opportunity because in the life science industry, there were a number of companies emerging, and the CEOs, the leaders, were doing the equivalent of stacking your money that you raised in a bonfire and setting it on fire. People were just trying to figure out how to be successful, in the industry. And so it became chaotic because with the companies that were coming into the space, it was about grabbing talent, right? Because how do you train up a sales team to talk about genetics and genomics when the clinicians who are treating the patients don't really understand this either? So it got very litigious in the field. People were scared. And so I saw the opportunity to go out and be a strategic consultant in the space to say, like, how can you differentiate yourself? How can you do this? And so podcasting was a medium that was available. Podcasting has been around for 15, 20 years. So I saw the opportunity for the small to medium-sized company to do it differently. Instead of hiring a sales team, I started to be engaged with a healthcare technology company out of Boston. And they had a proprietary, database on genetic information, genomic information to help payers understand what they should be paying for, right? And so the way they were deploying it, I told them they weren't going to make any money. Kudos to them. They actually listened to me. And we pivoted and we created a software, and I went out and, did the market research, brought people to them to help them understand what the life is of that clinician, what the life is of the payer, how organizationally they're doing things, and how this technology, this SaaS solution that we were building, can make things easier for them. We validated that there's a willingness to pay for the product, and this actually does solve a problem. But what we did was I said, listen, let's use podcasting, because what we were trying to solve, the job we were trying to nail is what are the challenges associated with the scale and access to this? Because, innovation means nothing in healthcare if patients don't have access to it at the end of the day. So let's have conversations with these stakeholders about what are the obstacles, and let's crowdsource how we solve them. Well, the podcast, we named it the Precision Medicine Podcast. Eureka, no one had that name, so we were kind of ahead of the curve. And what ended up happening is we titled, the podcast, the product name. So it was the Precision Medicine Podcast by Trapello. And through talking about it, we developed a following in the industry, and that got us, development relationships with customers in the industry, which got us more data and all those things. 5 years later, the product had been deployed. We have published data on how it streamlines the process of prior authorization to get patients faster access to these innovative medicines. Well, a public company bought that organization for $70 million. I got a whole bunch of texts from people, and it was a win. I had taken an equity role in the company. I don't have $70 million, by the way, but I took an equity role in the space and had a great exit. And as I was talking to the chief financial officer who had purchased the company, and just kind of having that initial conversation, and I was telling him how a lot of folks that I knew were congratulating me on, man, you sold your podcast for $70 million. And in full disclosure, that company stood up the podcast. They own the rights to it. But the way that I was thinking, I was like, yeah, it's kind of funny. These people think that you bought my podcast for 70 million. And the guy laughs and he goes, we did. Now that taught me two important things, which is the reason why I'm here now. One, I didn't own it. Two, is that I actually did have the knowledge and skill to develop an asset that someone would purchase for $70 million. And so this is the model of confidence that I teach organizations on how to be innovative, how to step out in a way to take risks that you become a market leader and that increases your influence in the industry that not only, retains workers, valuable workers, but also influences key opinion leaders in the space, that you become that go-to, the most trusted, the most innovative company in the space, because it builds confidence from the top, and everybody in the organization follows that blueprint.
That's awesome. And I just want to be clear, we are for sale for $70 million. If anybody is interested in purchasing our podcast, you can even fire me right away. It's fine. It's fine. All right. Just looking at our clock, looking at where we are in the conversation, it probably feels like a good time to get practical, right? This is the segment of every show. Gosh, all but one show we have done this at the end of every episode. It's our let's get practical. We want to leave our audience with specific things, actionable steps that they can take starting tomorrow. Simple, actionable steps to help make inroads in any area that we've talked about today. Confidence, acceptance, leading through chaos, and perhaps anything we didn't talk about today. So Rome, we'll kick it to you. We'll give you the opportunity to go first. What are 2 or 3 suggestions that you have, pieces of advice that you would have for a frustrated CEO that they can implement to make a difference?
Well, I think the first thing is get closer to your customer. And as we talked about, that not only includes knowing what causes your customer to buy your product or solution over someone else's. What caused them to buy your product or solution, but what would cause them to buy it over something else that's out there? So that's get closer to your customer. And that also, as we called out, means your internal customers. Just because of the organizational structure and the difference in responsibilities in the organization, there's a big distance between that visionary leader of the organization and everyone else. But you can't allow that distance to stay there. Shorten that distance by coming down and understanding what they're dealing with, showing that you care, that their work experience that they're having with the organization, matters, and how they can improve that. So get closer to your customer if you're frustrated, because you'd be amazed at the things that you can learn that you may not be learning from those people who are responsible for speaking to you and rolling up to you directly. So shorten that distance between you and your customer. I think by doing that, you will understand that causative factor that causes people to buy. And even in an internal sense, that causative factor that causes your people to stay with your organization. And that is understanding Clayton Christensen, the very notable Harvard professor. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma. He calls it understanding the job that needs to be done. And the great analogy that he talks about is, Disneyland. When Walt Disney created Disneyland, people thought it was just like, hey, this is just a great place for kids. Well, the reason why Disneyland was so successful, because coming out of World War I, World War II, we created the middle class. And these folks had families. They are now college graduates. They're homeowners. They had more disposable income. Well, the job that needed to be done, Walt Disney thought, was how to make those parents feel like kids again. And so they created Disneyland as a way to immerse them in the cartoons, the cartoon movies that, they watched growing up. And that was the job that needed to be done. And as a result, they brought their kids to experience the same feeling that they did as kids. And that's why that became so successful as a concept. So it really is understanding and nailing the job that needs to be done for your customer. Why? What is it that they're really trying to solve? What is it that they really want to accomplish by buying your product or your solution, or by working for your organization when they might have an opportunity to go elsewhere? So understanding, by getting closer to your customers, internal and external, you'll understand that job that needs to be done. And then, the third thing is, especially for leaders and CEOs, when you're stuck, get a coach. And this is not, one of those duh moments, but think about it like this. It doesn't matter what sport you think about. Anybody who's considered the best in the world at what they do had a coach.
They've got a coach. That's exactly right.
Whether you're a Michael Jordan is the greatest, or LeBron James is the greatest, guess what?
Yep.
Their entire lives, they've had a coach.
That's right.
It is the coach's responsibility to help get you unstuck. And so if you are frustrated, get a coach, because it's that coach that helps you develop the skill and the insight to work on those deficiencies that you may have and help you improve.
Well, I would
Well said.
those first 5 or 10 minutes, but look
Yeah,
at the
100%
building
agree.
blocks of confidence.
Patsy, what would you add?
The first building block being self-acceptance and all its various components. The second being self-competence, and then being a strategic leader. So those are the building blocks. Go ahead.
And with that, Patsy, it is the coach that can really, let's face it, for people who are in those roles where everyone looks to them, it can be very challenging to take a stance of humility, because we just get so many fiery darts and arrows thrown at us. Like, you can't stay humble. You got to fortify yourself somehow. That's the job of a coach, to keep you in that place of humility, to keep the main thing, and to help you to really think about those fiery darts and arrows as opportunities versus threats, right?
And I will add, which is one of my very favorites, embody the standards of excellence. It is about how do we incorporate them into our being on all levels. So that would be another piece I would add there. I also thought that you're set a bar of performance. I think set a bar of high performance, which includes positive peer pressure, or could say peer support or peer development.
I would add, I got a few. I'm trying to narrow them down. Yes. So I'll kind of when we're talking about leading through chaos, keep your head when others are losing theirs, if you want to find the opportunities that are available to you in the chaos. And remember that chaos equals opportunity. I'd also add, you talked about you aren't your GPA, you aren't your degree or your certifications, you're not your title or your salary. Ground yourself in your purpose, in your why, if you want real self-esteem, real acceptance, and real self-confidence. And then I'd like to it's a good reminder, as a leader, you work for the organization. And if you adopt and embrace that mindset, it'll change how you are perceived by the organization. It makes you more relatable. And since leadership really is about influence, I think that's pretty foundational for influence, is being seen as relatable, being seen as someone people can connect with. So I have others, but I think those are some of the heavy hitters. Patsy, any you want to add?
Well, I will piggyback. Yeah, I do. I want to piggyback on what you're just talking about, which is, I think every leader we work with, or they want more influence. So what you said, Rome, is people follow you because of the light within you. So that is counterintuitive for a lot of people. So,
I like it.
I want to accent.
This has been fun. Rome, if listener is interested in, well, first of all, you mentioned podcasting. I know you sold the first one for 70 million. So I guess the goal now is to sell the second one for 100 million. What is or maybe, I don't know, is this your second, your third? You currently host a podcast. If somebody's interested in listening to that, talk about that. What is that and where can we find it?
So the podcast is called, and it's my second podcast, and this is, it's called Genetics for Healthcare. It's a podcast for patients. And so in the world of genetics and genomics, again, I've been in this field for over 2 decades, and we have grown to a point to where this is the most innovative industry in medicine. You hear about gene editing, you hear about targeted therapies, genetic testing, and these genetic and genomic insights allow us to not just practice, we're very good at sick care, not really healthcare. We're really good at sick care, like waiting until something happens. And so this transformation of the industry now, especially with the advent of AI, is enabling hospital systems now to prevent diseases or to discover diseases like cancer earlier so we can have improved outcomes, and so they don't have such a drain on our healthcare system dollars. The last mile of that is patient demand. And this is the purpose of our podcast. This is so that patients, people that are impacted by the disease, can learn the language and have the confidence to become more effective advocates for themselves. So when they go into the doctor, they can ask these questions of the doctor and know what to ask for, know the experience. And we have a patient first lens on all the stories that we tell, because most of the people who come to our show are non-medical people. And this concept is very complex concept of genetics and genomics. We want to break it down to where it's not intimidating. It is empowering. And so that's the purpose of our podcast. You can find us at geneticsforhealthcare.com or go to romemadison.com and find all those things that we're doing to really help folks.
And earlier before we started rolling, you said you're very active on LinkedIn. So if anybody is interested in connecting with you there, they can find you, I'm assuming?
Absolutely. You just Google Rome Madison. You can go to all of my social media platforms there, and you can certainly type in Rome Madison, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Rome, thank you for joining us today on the Frustrated CEO podcast. It's been fun. It's been really, obviously, a topic near and dear to
yep.
I think, both of our hearts, yes. For sure. Patsy, any final thoughts before we roll the credits?
I think we're good to go, but I would second that. Near and dear to our hearts. So thank you.
Yeah. Rome, thank you. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. And listener, thank you for sticking with us to the end of another episode. You can find us. Actually, you can find this whole episode if you're listening and you are wondering that you want to put the faces to the voices. You can actually see just how handsome Rome Madison is. You can check us out on our YouTube channel. Just search for the Frustrated CEO podcast. Connect with us there. Connect with us, Patsy and I, both on LinkedIn. We're on TikTok. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. So there are multiple ways for you to engage, connect with us. Drop us a line. Let us know what's working, what's not. If you have ideas for future guests, if you'd like to be a guest, then connect with us through any one of those channels. Otherwise, I think that's it. We'll see you next time on the Frustrated CEO podcast.